Leonardo Sanchez stood as a towering figure of influence in the vibrant heart of the capital. His opulent townhouse in the bustling city center was a testament to his success, yet within its walls, an aching loneliness thrived, a truth he staunchly denied even to himself. Leonardo's existence was a relentless parade of high-powered negotiations, ceaseless business travels, and crucial meetings that left him no moment for introspection. With an air of unwavering confidence and decisive ambition, he navigated life like a precise arrow relentlessly pursuing its target. Sanchez's life was a beacon of envy and admiration. He was a coveted guest on television shows, constantly sought after for interviews by those desperate to unlock the secrets of his astounding achievements. Leonardo generously imparted his masterful time management techniques and strategic business insights, yet no one could pierce the fortress of his solitude or soar to the towering heights of the 45-year-old bachelor millionaire. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. A seemingly minor yet poignant disruption occurred when Leonardo returned from a demanding trip to Switzerland. As he paused briefly at his lavish home to change, his dedicated maid, Teresa, who had meticulously maintained his sanctuary for over 8 unwavering years, tendered her resignation. This unexpected departure of Teresa, a steadfast and comforting presence in his life, carved a deep and personal void, marking a rare and unsettling interruption in his otherwise meticulously orchestrated world. "Señor Sanchez, I must apologize, but my children desire to escape the relentless noise of the capital and relocate closer to the serene coastline, and they insist I accompany them. It breaks my heart to leave such a beautiful place behind. Over the years, I have grown deeply attached to you, almost as if you were my own son, yet this decision is beyond my control. My heart yearns to shower my grandchildren with love, and with my daughter-in-law expecting, I cannot refuse." Leonardo's expression hardened into a frown. These perpetual family entanglements. To him, familial bonds and emotional attachments only served to disrupt the carefully curated and orderly life he had painstakingly built. Indeed, the millionaire often seemed more like an unfeeling machine than a man, but in the unforgiving realm of big business, there was no other path. One had to press forward, unyielding and indifferent to all else, or face the abyss of failure. He handed Teresa a generous severance and promptly called his secretary to arrange for a new maid, stipulating that she must be unmarried and without children. "Sylvia, it would be ideal if you could find someone plain and unremarkable," he instructed his secretary. "Someone who remains at home in the evenings and isn't particularly attractive to men. Such a person will likely stay with us for the long haul." "Understood, Señor Sanchez," Sylvia responded, determined. "I'll find someone perfect for you." The next day, Leoncio laid eyes on her for the first time. She embodied simplicity and humility. A gray, slightly tattered sweater clung to her slender frame, and a black skirt modestly fell below her knees. Her chestnut hair was neatly pulled back into an unpretentious ponytail, and her blue eyes peeked timidly from behind thick glasses. Her feet were encased in sturdy, old-fashioned boots, giving her an almost antiquated appearance. Her voice, barely above a whisper, was laced with shyness, and she nervously played with the strap of her worn bag. "Exactly what I need," Sanchez mused with a sense of satisfaction. "Sylvia always gets it right. Where did she even find this girl? She looks like she stepped straight out of a history book." "What is your name?" the millionaire inquired, his voice sharp but curious. "Blanca," she replied softly, her gaze fixed firmly on the ground, too intimidated to meet his piercing eyes. "Excellent," Leoncio nodded with satisfaction. "Every morning, you are to arrive, regardless of my presence, and carry out your cleaning duties. The bedding must be replaced every other day. Pay special attention to dusting the plants and meticulously cleaning the glasses in the display cabinets on a daily basis. After you finish cleaning, put on white socks and walk through all the rooms. If the socks remain spotless, It means you've done your job perfectly and can go home. If they get dirty, you will need to clean the floors again. Do you understand?" Blanca nodded submissively, her voice barely audible as she replied, "Yes, Senor Sanchez." Is she truly this quiet, or is she merely pretending? Leoncio wondered, suspicion creeping into his mind. She needs to be tested. Once Blanca left, he walked into his office and opened both of his safes, transferring money from one to the other. He opened a bundle and extracted a dozen large bills, which he carelessly tossed into the empty safe. Then, he closed the first safe, leaving the second one slightly ajar, just enough to be noticeable. "Let's see if she is as honest as she appears," Leoncio thought smugly as he turned on the surveillance camera. The following morning, Leoncio packed his suitcase and set off on another business trip. 2 days later, he returned home, and upon entering the house, he was greeted by a delightful fragrance in the hallway. He wandered through the rooms, noting with satisfaction that everything was immaculate: no dust, no crumbs, just spotless cleanliness. Deciding to unwind with a bath, he headed to the bathroom, which was also impeccably clean. On the counter were new, unopened shampoo, shaving cream, and toothpaste. Leoncio appreciated the maid's attentiveness. He hadn't mentioned the need for these items, yet she had noticed and replenished them. After his bath, he donned his favorite dark blue terry cloth robe and slipped into his soft slippers before heading to his office. "So far, I'm impressed, but let's see what the video reveals," Leoncio muttered to himself. Despite feeling exhausted from his trip, he was keen on assessing the situation immediately. If she hasn't taken anything from the safe, she will have proven her trustworthiness, he thought. Original paragraph. He turned on the TV screen, navigating to the surveillance footage. Rewinding to the relevant moment, he fast-forwarded through the recording, settling onto the couch to watch. The scene unfolded predictably. The maid, in her black uniform and white apron, entered the office and began cleaning. She meticulously organized the papers and folders scattered on the desk, mopped the floor, and dusted the bookshelves and safes. Leoncio yawned, fast-forwarding to the following day's footage. Again, the same routine played out: mundane yet thorough actions, almost lulling Leoncio to sleep with their repetitive precision. However, this time, the maid walked across the floor in white socks with a serious and even tense look, which amused Sanchez. He was about to turn off the video, satisfied that the maid hadn't touched his money, when suddenly on the video, Blanca entered his office again. She was already wearing her street clothes, the same gray sweater and wide dark blue jeans. She stood in the middle of the office for a while, as if hesitating. Leoncio leaned forward, watching the screen intently. What was she going to do? Rewritten paragraph. Leoncio switched on the television, anticipation bubbling within him as he navigated to the surveillance footage. With deliberate precision, he rewound to the crucial moment and then sped through the recording, settling into the couch with a mix of curiosity and weariness. The scene began to reveal itself in a monotonous yet familiar pattern. The maid, dressed in her stark black uniform and pristine white apron, entered the office and set about her tasks. She painstakingly organized the scattered papers and disarrayed folders on the desk, mopped the floor with meticulous care, and dusted the bookshelves and safes with a methodical thoroughness. As Leoncio stifled a yawn, he fast-forwarded to the footage from the following day. Once more, the same mundane routine unfolded, the maid's diligent actions almost hypnotic in their repetitive precision, threatening to lull him into a drowsy stupor. But then, an unexpected detail jolted him awake. The maid glided across the floor in white socks, a look of intense seriousness and underlying tension etched on her face, which elicited a flicker of amusement from Sanchez. Just as he was about to turn off the video, content that the maid had not meddled with his money, something startling happened. Blanca re-entered the office, now clad in her casual street attire, the familiar gray sweater and wide dark blue jeans. She paused in the center of the office, lingering as if caught in a web of indecision. Leoncio's interest piqued, and he leaned forward, his eyes riveted to the screen. What was she contemplating? The air grew thick with anticipation as he watched her every move, his mind racing with possibilities, his heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Determination finally etched itself onto Blanca's face. She made her way to the bookshelves and picked up what seemed to be a book. The millionaire sprang from the couch, trying to get a better view. Was she planning to borrow something from his personal library? Leoncio chuckled at the thought, imagining her as a secret bookworm. However, his amusement turned to shock when he realized Blanca wasn't holding a book at all, it was his old photo album. Leoncio's disbelief grew. What on earth did she want with his photographs? In utter amazement, he watched the video as Blanca hurriedly flipped through the pages, her movements quick and deliberate. She paused at one particular page and then, to his astonishment, extracted a photograph. She glanced around nervously before slipping the picture into her pocket. A wave of anger surged through Leoncio Sanchez. Could this girl truly be a journalist, a paparazzo who had cunningly infiltrated his home? So that was why she had always seemed so modest and unassuming. The realization hit him hard, and he seethed with fury, grappling with the betrayal unfolding before his eyes. The millionaire abruptly turned off the video and hurried to the bookshelf, his hands trembling with anger as he located the photo album. He frantically flipped through its pages, confirming his fear all the photos were intact except one. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Leoncio Sanchez sank back onto the couch, letting the album slip from his grasp and fall to the floor. He stared blankly ahead, his mind a void, yet his heart ached with a resurgence of long-buried bitterness and disappointment. He remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, ensnared in a strange trance that was finally shattered by the relentless ticking of the clock. With a weary sigh, Leoncio stood up, brushing aside strands of damp hair that clung to his forehead. He left the office with a newfound sense of resolve. Tomorrow, he would have Sylvia arrange a meeting with the new maid in his office. For now, he knew he needed to rest and regain his composure for the difficult conversation that awaited him the next day. The following morning, Leoncio Sanchez awoke 10 minutes before his alarm, a habit ingrained in him over the years. He rose from bed, took a refreshing shower, and brewed himself a strong cup of coffee. After savoring the brew, he dressed meticulously and made his way to the office. Sylvia, as punctual as ever, greeted him in the reception area. Clad in a striking red suit, the tall, slender blonde exuded confidence and elegance, embodying the image of the company's front-facing persona. Leoncio nodded to her, acknowledging her presence, but his mind was already racing with the thoughts of the impending confrontation. Today was going to be challenging, and he needed to be at his best to handle it. He walked with purpose to his office, ready to face whatever the day had in store for him. "Good morning, mister." Sanchez Sylvia greeted him cheerfully, her smile radiating warmth. "How was your trip?" "Excellent, as always," Leoncio responded briskly, not wanting to dwell on pleasantries. "Sylvia, I have a request for you." "What is it, sir?" she asked, her professional demeanor immediately taking over. "All the new maid. I need her to come to my office. I need to speak with her," he instructed, his voice firm and unyielding. "When would you like her to come?" Sylvia inquired, her fingers already poised over the phone. "The sooner, the better," he replied without hesitation. "All right, Mr. Sanchez. I'll call her right away," Sylvia assured him, her efficiency evident. Leoncio nodded in acknowledgement and swiftly retreated into his office. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on his mind. He paced back and forth, his thoughts a tangled web of suspicion and anticipation. An hour later, a timid knock echoed through the office door. Leoncio's heart rate quickened as he called out, "Come in." Blanca entered the room hesitantly, her eyes downcast and her posture nervous. She stepped forward cautiously, acutely aware of the tension in the air. Leoncio studied her intently, searching for any sign of deceit or guilt. "Blanca," he began, his tone stern yet controlled. "I need to ask you a few questions." Blanca nodded, her eyes meeting his briefly before darting away. "Yes, Mr. Sanchez. I'll answer whatever you need." Leoncio took a deep breath, steadying himself for the conversation ahead. "Tell me, Blanca, why did you take that photograph from my album?" "Come in," he called out. Leoncio Sanchez, his expression stern, crossed his arms over his chest as the girl awkwardly entered and sat down across from him. The tension in the room was palpable. So Leoncio began sharply, "Confess, which newspaper do you work for?" Blanca's eyebrows shot up in astonishment, her face a mask of confusion. "I don't understand what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I believe you understand perfectly well," Sanchez replied, his tone uncompromising and cold. "I saw everything. There was a camera in the office." Blanca paled, her gaze dropping to the floor. A heavy silence settled over the office, the air thick with unspoken accusations and fear. "You mean the photograph I took from the album?" Blanca finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Exactly," Leoncio confirmed, his anger and irritation evident in every word. How skillfully she pretends to be an innocent lamb, he thought, feeling a surge of frustration. Blanca looked up at him again, her blue eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. I didn't mean to do anything wrong, Mr. Sanchez," she began, her voice shaking. "That photograph, it's important to me. It's a picture of my mother." Leoncio's hard expression faltered for a moment, caught off guard by her response. "Your mother," he repeated, his tone softening slightly. Blanca nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, my mother used to work for your family many years ago. She spoke highly of this place, and when I found out there was a photograph of her here, I just wanted to have a piece of her memory. I didn't mean to steal or deceive you." Leoncio studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. The sincerity in her eyes was undeniable, and his anger began to wane. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Why didn't you just ask me for it?" Blanca looked down again, ashamed. "I was afraid you'd say no." "I'm sorry, Mr. Sanchez. I should have asked." Leoncio took a deep breath, his frustration giving way to a mix of understanding and resignation. "Blanca, honesty is always the best policy. I would have gladly given you the photograph if you had just explained your reasons." Blanca nodded, tears now streaming down her face. "I understand. I'm truly sorry." Leoncio leaned back in his chair, the tension slowly dissipating. "All right, Blanca, let's put this behind us. You can keep the photograph. But remember, trust is crucial. Don't ever betray it again." Blanca looked up, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I promise I won't let you down again." "Yes, I took it, but I swear I don't work for a newspaper, and I didn't intend to publish it." There was a raw sincerity in her tone that struck Leoncio deeply. For a moment he wondered if she was an exceptional actress or genuinely telling the truth. "Then why did you take the photograph?" And why, he paused, struggling to find the words, this one. Blanca's chin trembled, and it was clear she was fighting back tears. The vulnerability in her eyes was unmistakable. "Mr. Sanchez, I took this picture because it shows you with my mother." Her words hit him like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. Leoncio Sanchez was momentarily speechless, his mind reeling from the unexpected revelation. "What did you say?" he asked hesitantly, scarcely believing his ears. "In the photograph I took from your album, my mother is standing beside you," Blanca repeated quietly, her voice filled with emotion. Leoncio's mind raced as he struggled to comprehend the situation. Memories from years ago began to surface, clouded by time but slowly coming into focus. He recalled the woman in the photograph, a kind and dedicated maid who had worked for his family. "Your mother," he echoed, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and nostalgia. Blanca nodded, tears finally spilling over. "Yes, my mother used to tell me stories about working here, about you. When I saw the photograph, I felt an overwhelming need to have it, to keep a piece of her memory alive." Leoncio's stern demeanor softened as he saw the genuine pain and longing in Blanca's eyes. The situation was far more complex and emotional than he had imagined. "I had no idea," he said softly, more to himself than to Blanca. "She was a wonderful woman." Blanca nodded again, wiping her tears. "She spoke highly of you too, Mr. Sanchez. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just wanted something to remember her by." Leoncio took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. "Blanca, I'm sorry for accusing you. You should have told me the truth from the beginning, but I understand why you didn't." Blanca looked up, hope mingling with her tears. "Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I truly appreciate your understanding." Leoncio nodded, a sense of resolution filling the room. "You can keep the photograph, Blanca. And if there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask. Your mother was a valued part of our lives, and so are you." Blanca's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. This means more to me than you can imagine." Leoncio watched her leave, his thoughts a whirl of past memories and present emotions. The confrontation had taken an unexpected turn, leaving him with a renewed sense of connection to the people who had quietly shaped his life. "Lord, your mother?" he asked, still grappling with the reality of the situation. Blanca nodded, confirming his worst fears. "But how is this possible? It can't be a coincidence," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Blanca looked him straight in the eyes and nodded again. "Of course not," she replied with a touch of disdain. "I knew from the beginning what kind of scoundrel I was getting involved with by taking this job." Leoncio Sanchez was stunned. He had suspected that Blanca was playing the role of a modest and quiet girl, but he never imagined she could hurl such direct insults at him. "How dare you?" he erupted, regaining some composure. "You stole something that belongs to me, and now you allow yourself to make such statements. How dare you?" Blanca met his gaze with cold calmness. "I stole one thing from you, but you stole everything from my mother," she unexpectedly exclaimed, her voice filled with bitterness. Leoncio's heart clenched with pain. "Me? I stole?" "Yes," Blanca said, her eyes narrowing as she lifted her chin proudly. "She sacrificed so much for you, and you betrayed her." Leoncio Sanchez no longer heard her words. Memories of distant days, which he had long suppressed and tried to erase from his mind, surged forward with furious force. He closed his eyes, and involuntarily, he was transported back 22 years. Back then, Leoncio had just graduated from university and was actively searching for his first job. Coming from an ordinary family with no influential connections, he knew he had to rely solely on himself. He walked into company offices, personally handing his resume to the secretaries of the bosses. Blanca's mother, Lord, was the assistant to the director of a promising logistics firm. When Leoncio first looked into her blue eyes, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. He was utterly taken with this slim, red-haired girl. The young man knew that asking for her number was too bold, but at the same time he felt he wouldn't get another chance. So, blushing and stuttering, he dared to suggest meeting her for lunch. Those early days were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. Leoncio remembered how they would steal moments together amidst their busy schedules, how her laughter would light up his day, and how her unwavering support gave him strength. Yet something had gone terribly wrong. He had moved on to another job, climbed the corporate ladder, and lost touch with many from his past, including Lord. The memories came rushing back, bringing with them a storm of guilt and regret. He had been young and ambitious, perhaps too self-centered to see the sacrifices she had made. And now, standing before him was her daughter, bearing the weight of those past mistakes. Blanca's voice pulled him back to the present. "My mother loved you, Mr. Sanchez. She spoke of you often, with a mix of pride and sadness. She never understood why you abandoned her." Leoncio's eyes filled with remorse as he finally grasped the depth of the hurt he had caused. I didn't know," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was so consumed with my career that I lost sight of what truly mattered." Blanca's expression softened slightly, but the pain remained. "It's too late for apologies, Mr. Sanchez. I came here to find out what happened and to reclaim a piece of my mother's past. I didn't come here to hurt you, but you needed to know the truth." Leoncio nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of his past actions. "I understand, Blanca. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to have that photograph. Your mother was a remarkable woman, and I failed her. I am truly sorry." Blanca took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and relief. "Thank you for acknowledging that, Mr. Sanchez. I think we both needed this closure." Leoncio watched as Blanca turned to leave, her figure a poignant reminder of the past he could never change. As the door closed behind her, he vowed to honor the memory of the woman he had once loved by making amends and living his life with the integrity he had once lost. Lord, with a condescending look, glanced at his worn-out suit but agreed to the lunch. They met the next day, and Leoncio took Lord to a restaurant that was clearly beyond his means. He felt she deserved nothing but the best, so he decisively spent his last money on fine wine and expensive dishes. Lord was impressed. It seemed she had never been to such places before, just like Leoncio himself. Later they laughed heartily, reminiscing about the pompous rich people at neighboring tables. The first date was followed by a second, then a third, and soon a fourth. Leoncio and Lord found immense joy in each other's company. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, and they often understood each other with just a half word. As time went on, the young man realized that he couldn't imagine his life without Lord. He decided to introduce her to his parents. Leoncio was incredibly nervous about this meeting, but his anxiety turned out to be groundless. The family dinner went perfectly, the atmosphere warm and welcoming. His parents looked at Lord with admiring glances, and Leoncio felt a swell of pride and joy. That evening, he confessed his love to her for the first time. They stood on the veranda. The evening was warm, and the stars shone brightly above them. Leoncio felt that there was no one happier in the world than he was at that moment. He and Lord held hands tightly, feeling the profound connection between them. He leaned towards her ear and whispered, "I want you to be my wife." Lord laughed softly and whispered back, "But you haven't met my family yet. What if you change your mind?" Leoncio shook his head, his eyes filled with determination and love. "I won't change my mind," he said firmly. "I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Lord's eyes sparkled with joy as she realized the depth of his feelings. She kissed him gently on the lips and whispered, "Then let's make it happen. I love you too, Leoncio." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Leoncio and Lord supported each other through thick and thin, their love a constant source of strength. They made plans for their future together, dreaming of a life filled with happiness and adventure. However, life had its own plans, and unforeseen circumstances soon tested their relationship in ways they could never have anticipated. Blanca's accusations had reopened old wounds, forcing Leoncio to confront the past he had tried so hard to forget. As he reflected on his love for Lord, he realized how much he had lost and how deeply he had hurt those he cared about. He knew that making amends wouldn't be easy, but it was a journey he was willing to undertake. For the sake of his own peace of mind and to honor the memory of the woman he had once loved, Leoncio resolved to face his past with courage and integrity. But the young man shook his head. Not for anything. They kissed under the stars for a long time, savoring the moment, until his parents called them back inside to taste Mom's famous chocolate cake. The next weekend, it was Lord's turn to invite Leoncio to her home. "Now it's my turn to introduce you to my parents," she declared with a playful smile. Leoncio felt a fresh wave of nerves, even more intense than the first time. He spent a long time choosing the perfect shirt, carefully ironing it, though it still seemed wrinkled to him. Finally satisfied, he got ready and left the house. Lord's parents lived just a few blocks away, so Leoncio decided to walk. On the way, he bought flowers and chocolates for Lord, her mother, and her younger sister. He tried to recall her sister's name but drew a blank. Lord always referred to her as Dragonfly. Just as he approached the house, the name finally surfaced in his memory. Lord had mentioned once that her younger sister was named after their grandfather. Leoncio knocked on the door. It swung open to reveal a red-haired girl who looked about 14. "Hi, Federica," the young man said cheerfully. "I'm Leoncio, your sister's friend." He expected the girl to smile at him, but she only furrowed her brow and muttered something incomprehensible before disappearing into the house. Shrugging, Leoncio stepped into the spacious corridor. Lord's family was clearly well off. They lived in a large mansion with plenty of room for everyone. A few moments later, Lord descended the stairs, looking stunning in a lovely red dress with a deep neckline and a beautiful pearl necklace. Her hair was pinned up at the back, adorned with a shiny hairpin. "Welcome," she said warmly, reaching out to take his hand. "Don't mind Federica. She's shy around new people." Leoncio smiled, his earlier nerves fading in the presence of Lord's reassuring touch. "I brought flowers and chocolates," he said, handing her the gifts. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful," Lord replied, her eyes sparkling. She led him into the living room, where her parents were waiting. Lord's father, a tall man with graying hair, and her mother, a graceful woman with an air of elegance, greeted Leoncio warmly. They exchanged pleasantries, and Leoncio could feel the tension in his shoulders slowly melting away. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, much like it had been at his own family dinner. The conversation flowed easily, and Leoncio found himself laughing and sharing stories as if he had known Lord's family for years. Federica, still reserved, watched from the sidelines, her curiosity evident despite her shyness. As the evening progressed, they moved to the dining room for dinner. The table was set with an array of delicious dishes, and the meal was filled with lively conversation and laughter. Leoncio felt a deep sense of belonging, as if he had found another home. After dinner, Lord and Leoncio stepped out onto the veranda, where the evening air was cool and the stars were beginning to appear. They stood close together, holding hands and enjoying the peaceful moment. "Thank you for coming tonight," Lord said softly. "It means a lot to me." "It was my pleasure," Leoncio replied, squeezing her hand gently. "Your family is wonderful." Lord smiled, her eyes shining with affection. "I knew they would love you." As they stood there, basking in the warmth of their connection, Leoncio felt a profound sense of happiness and contentment. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he and Lord would face them together, their love stronger than ever. "Oh, I see Dragonfly has already let you in," Lord exclaimed joyfully upon seeing Leoncio. "Yes," and then she promptly vanished, he admitted with a laugh. "That's her style," Lord chuckled. She took the flowers and chocolates from him. "Come on, let's go to the living room. Our parents are already waiting for us." Leoncio took a deep breath and followed Lord down the hallway. As they entered the living room, he was greeted by the warm smiles of her parents. They turned out to be very kind people and excellent conversationalists. They asked Leoncio about his work, and he eagerly shared the latest news about his new job at a reputable investment firm. "We're so happy for you," Leoncio Lord's mom said with genuine warmth. "Our daughter mentioned that you were looking for quite some time, and unfortunately, her company had to reject your application." "Yes, that's true," Leoncio replied, "but I'm not upset about it. Lord's company has given me a treasure that turned out to be much more valuable than any of their positions." He smiled tenderly at Lord, who returned his smile with equal affection. Federica, however, grimaced at the sight. She hastily stuffed everything on her plate into her mouth and, without thanking anyone, stormed off to her room. "Federica clearly doesn't like me," Leoncio whispered to Lord. She just waved her hand dismissively. "Don't pay attention to her, darling. She's always like that." The evening continued pleasantly despite Federica's abrupt departure. Lord's parents engaged Leoncio in more conversation, asking about his interests and future plans. They shared stories from their own lives, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere that put Leoncio at ease. After dinner, they moved to the cozy sitting area by the fireplace. Lord's father poured everyone a glass of wine, and they toasted to new beginnings and cherished memories. Leoncio felt a sense of belonging that he had rarely experienced before. As the night drew on, Lord's parents excused themselves, leaving the young couple alone by the flickering firelight. They sat close together, holding hands and enjoying the quiet intimacy of the moment. "Thank you for tonight," Leoncio said softly, gazing into Lord's eyes. "Your family is wonderful." Lord smiled, her eyes glowing with love. "I'm glad you think so. They really like you too." Leoncio leaned in and kissed her gently, feeling the depth of their connection strengthen with each passing moment. "I feel so lucky to have you in my life," he whispered against her lips. "And I feel the same way about you," Lord replied, her voice filled with emotion. "I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." As they embraced, Leoncio felt a profound sense of peace and happiness. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their love unwavering and strong. The evening had not only strengthened his bond with Lord, but also forged a meaningful connection with her family. For Leoncio, this was more than just a dinner, it was a promise of a bright and shared future. Leoncio wanted to believe her, but something told him that Lord was wrong. Apart from Federica's provocative behavior, the evening was a great success. When Leoncio kissed Lord goodbye and left the house, he felt great. The worry of the past few days had receded, and he was happy that the challenging moments were behind him. Now he could calmly propose to Lord and prepare for the wedding. With his new job, he could afford a larger apartment where they both would feel cozy and comfortable. With these optimistic thoughts, Leoncio returned home, took a shower, and peacefully fell asleep. Everything was turning out just as he had planned, even better. An old university friend who had become a real estate agent found him a beautiful apartment in the city center overlooking a beautiful park. Leoncio went to see it alone. He wanted to surprise Lord. He walked through the bright rooms, trying to imagine Lord's reaction, and it seemed to him that he couldn't find anything better. The apartment seemed to be made for the two of them. Without any further doubt, Leoncio made the deposit. Then he went downtown to buy a ring for Lord. He pondered over options for a long time until he settled on a delicate and very elegant ring adorned with a pale blue topaz. Just like the color of her eyes, he thought. He bought the ring on credit, intending to pay for it with his next paycheck. Now it's just left to propose to Lord. Leoncio carefully considered the details for a long time. He wanted everything to be very beautiful and romantic. While walking through the center, he noticed a small but cozy restaurant where a violinist was playing. He entered and ordered a cup of coffee. The waiter brought Leoncio his order, and the young man sat for a long time listening to the musician. Dreams took him somewhere far away. He imagined walking through life hand in hand with Lord, and how she would become his only destiny. They would have children, then grandchildren, and they would spend their old age in a little house by the lake somewhere outside the city. Leoncio even shed a tear. He envisioned it all so vividly. Then he got up, paid for the coffee, and firmly decided to return here with Lord and propose to her to the beautiful sounds of the violin. It happened the following week, and everything went perfectly. Lord suspected nothing. She was more beautiful than ever. Her pink dress accentuated her fragility and tenderness. She curled and let her hair loose, and it cascaded in beautiful waves down her shoulders and back. Leoncio felt like everyone around was only looking at Lord, and he felt proud that this girl would soon be his wife. Leoncio felt like the luckiest and happiest person on earth. He was beside a beautiful woman, and things at work were going better than ever. It was like a fairy tale. When the violinist played one of the most poignant and tender melodies, Leoncio got down on one knee and proposed to Lord. She couldn't hold back her tears. Everyone around applauded. "Will you marry me?" Leoncio asked, looking at her with eyes shining with anticipation of happiness. "Yes," the girl replied. "Yes, I will." The guests applauded the beautiful couple once again. Leoncio lifted Lord up and twirled her around to the beautiful sounds of the violin. When they sat down at the table, a gray-haired man with long mustaches approached them. He wore an old-fashioned checkered jacket and trousers with pleats. "You're a very beautiful couple, and I'm a retired photographer," he said softly. "It sounds strange, but it happens. I got so tired of photographing endless and monotonous weddings that 5 years ago I swore I wouldn't take another photo. But you've inspired me. There's so much love emanating from you. So allow me to take just one photo." Lord smiled and nodded. Leoncio sat next to her and hugged his beloved, and the man took their picture. A couple of days later, he sent a copy of the photo to Sanchez's office. Leoncio carefully tucked it into his planner to show Lord later. The wedding was scheduled for the end of April. There was just over a month left to prepare. However, life intervened in the lovers' perfect plans. One morning, Leoncio came to work and saw a note from his boss asking him to come to his office. Surprised and somewhat nervous, Sanchez immediately went to the chief's office. On the way, he pondered why the boss needed to see him. He really hoped he wouldn't be fired for some unknown reason. After all, the wedding was just around the corner, and moving to a new apartment, losing his job now would be unthinkable. However, Leoncio's fears were unfounded. He immediately noticed that the boss was in a good mood. He greeted him warmly with a friendly smile. "I have news for you," Sanchez said, the boss, "and I hope you'll be as pleased with it as I am." Leoncio smiled. "I certainly hope so too." The boss gestured to the chair opposite him, and the young man sat down. "The thing is," continued the boss, "we're opening our first overseas branch." "Oh, congratulations," Leoncio said sincerely. "I wonder what I have to do with this," he thought to himself. "And you have a direct role to play in this," said the boss, as if reading his thoughts. Miss Sanchez was surprised. "You excelled at university. Your diploma speaks for itself. You have excellent reviews from your professors. You've also proven yourself to be a young but very promising specialist here. We need people like you. That's why I've decided to appoint you as the manager of the branch that is about to open in." He didn't manage to finish his sentence because the agitated Leoncio interrupted him. "I'm very flattered, sir, but does this mean I'll have to relocate?" The boss raised an eyebrow. "Is that a problem for you?" Leoncio hesitated for a few minutes before responding. "The thing is, sir, I'm getting married soon." "How soon?" the boss asked, scrutinizing the young man. In a month." The boss cleared his throat and adjusted the already perfectly arranged papers on the table. "I'm sorry, Leoncio, but this is a very important step for the company. I didn't just choose you randomly. I believe you have a great future ahead. If you lead our branch, you'll be on a path that many aspire to, but not everyone gets such a chance. Consider yourself very lucky." Leoncio nervously adjusted his tie as if it were choking him. "But what about the wedding?" "Invitations have already been sent out and postpone it for a short while. You'll go, settle in, then come back, have your wedding, and take your wife with you. It's simple." Leoncio still had doubts. "Tell me what's bothering you." The boss began to lose patience. Leoncio looked him in the eye. "I'm very worried that Lord." "What about Lord? Can't she wait?" The boss smirked sarcastically. Sanchez nodded awkwardly. The boss stood up and began to pace nervously around the room. "What kind of love is it if the girl can't wait a couple of months? And why do you need such a wife?" Leoncio understood that the boss's words were more than fair, but something inside him clenched at the thought of postponing the wedding and leaving Lord here. "Or do you want to be handpicked?" The boss continued. "To protest your fate is at stake right now, not just yours, but your entire future family's. Doesn't she want to live decently and for your children not to need anything? Remember my words, you'll be a millionaire in no time. Do you want to miss such an opportunity?" The boss's argument sounded more than convincing, and Leoncio reluctantly agreed. Back in his office, he could barely wait for the end of the workday. In the evening, he and Lord agreed to have dinner together. He bought a bouquet of crimson roses and hurried to the restaurant, which was a few blocks away from the office. He arrived first. Lord had written that she would be a little late. Leoncio sat at the table and rehearsed the speech he was going to say to his beloved for the 100th time. He had never been so nervous before, and his heart ached and didn't want to go anywhere. Finally, Lord appeared. She was wearing a striking dark blue dress with an open neckline. A silver bracelet sparkled beautifully on her wrist. She had swept her hair to one side and wore long silver earrings. All the men turned to look at her as she walked to the table where Leoncio was waiting for her. "How can I leave her alone and go?" he thought jealously as he rose. "Sorry, dear." "Got stuck in traffic," Lord chirped, hugging him. He handed her a bouquet. "So beautiful." "Thank you, darling," the girl smiled. Leoncio helped her sit, then sat himself and cleared his throat. He knew he was about to ruin Lord's mood, but he couldn't hold it in any longer. "I need to tell you something," he said, with a voice unfamiliar to him, trembling with nerves. Lord instantly sensed his state, and the smile faded from her face. "What happened?" the girl asked, concerned. Leoncio recounted the details of his conversation with his boss, carefully observing his beloved's reaction. Lord paled but quickly composed herself. "Of course, I'm upset that we'll have to postpone the wedding, but career prospects are very important for you, for us, and our future. Your boss is right." Leoncio couldn't believe his ears. He knew Lord was sensible and rational, but he didn't expect her to accept this news so quickly and without much emotion. "What if she doesn't love me at all?" he briefly thought, but he quickly pushed away his doubts. "Thank you, my love," he said. "I'm so glad you understand the importance of what's happening. Did you think I would make a scene over a couple of months' delay?" Lord laughed. Leoncio laughed too, feeling surprisingly relieved. "Yes, that's exactly what I thought. And I also don't have the money to pay for all the dishes you broke in this restaurant. The rest of the evening went perfectly, and the next day, Leoncio began to prepare for his trip. Their meetings with Lord became even more tender. Both felt that the separation was approaching with each passing hour. On the day before his departure, Lord came to Leoncio. They sat on the couch and turned on some movie, but both were too distracted to follow the plot. Leoncio breathed in the scent of Lord's perfume, wanting to memorize every detail. The girl held on to her beloved tightly. Around midnight, Leoncio said he would call a taxi, but Lord shook her head. "Tonight, I want to stay with you." Leoncio's heart jumped in his chest. "Are you sure? I thought you wanted to wait until the wedding." Lord nodded decisively, her voice steady. "Yes, I'm sure. Tonight I want to be with you." Early the next morning, she left quietly. Leoncio had asked her not to see him off at the airport, knowing that saying goodbye in such a public, impersonal place would make the farewell even more painful. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving her in tears among a crowd of strangers. As they said their goodbyes at his doorstep, neither could hold back their tears. "I'll write as soon as I land," Leoncio whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Lord nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'll be waiting," she replied softly. "I love you." "I love you too, and I already miss you," he said, his heart aching with the impending separation. As Leoncio closed the door behind her, a sudden wave of fear washed over him. For a fleeting moment, he was gripped by the terrifying thought that they might never see each other again. He had an overwhelming urge to run after her, to catch her before she left, but he restrained himself. It would look foolish. They had already made their decision. Unbeknownst to him, Lord stood just outside the door, her hands pressed to her chest, battling the same hesitation to knock. The new country welcomed Leoncio warmly. He was treated with respect and kindness, which both surprised and humbled him. He felt young and inexperienced amidst these new surroundings. The initial days were challenging as he struggled to adapt to his new life, but gradually he began to find his footing. Each day he fulfilled his obligations more confidently. Despite the distance, he maintained a strong connection with Lord, calling and writing to her daily. Time seemed to fly, and the anticipation of their reunion kept them both going. Leoncio had already bought his ticket for the return trip. They just needed to wait 2 more weeks. That evening, as usual, he called Lord, but her phone was switched off. A sense of unease settled over him. He tried to reassure himself, thinking she might have forgotten to charge her phone or was busy with something. But as the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew. He sent a message, hoping she would see it and call back soon. The following day, there was still no response. Leoncio's worry turned to fear. He tried calling again, but her phone remained unreachable. Panic set in. He frantically sent messages, each more desperate than the last, but silence was his only answer. Days passed with no word from Lord. Leoncio's mind raced with possibilities, each more dreadful than the last. His work suffered as he found it hard to concentrate, his thoughts constantly drifting to her. He reached out to mutual friends, but no one had heard from her. The anxiety gnawed at him, an ever-present weight on his chest. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Leoncio decided to return earlier than planned. He changed his ticket and packed his bags with a heavy heart. The journey back felt interminable, each hour stretching painfully as he imagined what could have happened. His mind was a whirlwind of fear and hope, praying that she was safe. When he arrived at her apartment, he knocked urgently, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time, his desperation mounting. Still nothing. He called out her name, hoping she might hear him through the door. Silence. Just as he was about to turn away, defeated, he heard a faint sound from inside. He knocked again, calling her name with renewed hope. The door creaked open, and there stood Lord, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Without a word, she fell into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Lord, what happened?" he asked, his voice choked with concern. She clung to him, her body trembling. "I thought I'd lost you," she managed to say between sobs. Leoncio held her tightly, his own eyes filling with tears. "I'm here now," he whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, all the fear and uncertainty melted away. They stood there, holding each other, their love reaffirmed and stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they would face them together, side by side. Strange, he thought. That had never happened before. The young man called back an hour later, but the result was the same. He called Lord all evening, but she remained unreachable. His concern grew with each unanswered call, and by the time night fell, his mind was a tumult of worry and confusion. The next day, a message came through on his phone. "Forgive me, Leoncio. I met another man and fell in love with him." Leoncio read the message, feeling a cold shock wash over him. His hands trembled so violently that he nearly dropped the phone. Disbelief and heartbreak surged through him. He quickly dialed Lord's number again, his heart pounding in his chest, but she didn't pick up. He tried calling again and again, each ring amplifying his desperation and helplessness. How could this happen? Everything had seemed perfect between them. They had shared dreams, hopes, and plans for a future together. Now, in an instant, it all shattered like fragile glass. Leoncio sank into a chair, his mind racing. He replayed every memory, every conversation, looking for clues or signs he might have missed. His heart ached with a profound sense of loss, not just of the woman he loved, but of the life they had envisioned together. Each unanswered call was a stark reminder of the reality he was struggling to accept. He sent message after message, pleading for an explanation, hoping for a misunderstanding, but the silence was deafening. Each passing minute felt like an eternity, filled with a heavy, suffocating emptiness. That evening, as the sun set and darkness enveloped his room, Leoncio finally stopped calling. He sat there, staring blankly at his phone, the harsh glow of the screen the only light in the room. The words of her message echoed in his mind, a cruel mantra that refused to let him rest. His heart, once filled with love and hope, now felt hollow and broken. Days turned into weeks, and though the initial shock and pain subsided, the void remained. Leoncio went through the motions of his daily life, but everything felt muted, colorless. He missed her voice, her laughter, the way she made him feel alive. He longed for the days when a simple call or text from her could brighten his world. As time passed, Leoncio began to pick up the pieces of his life. He threw himself into his work, seeking solace in the routine and the distraction it provided. He leaned on friends and family, finding comfort in their support. Yet, every so often, he would find himself reaching for his phone, half expecting to see a message from her, even though he knew it would never come. Despite the pain, Leoncio held on to the belief that time would heal his wounds. He knew he needed to move forward, to rebuild his life without her. It was a slow, arduous process, but little by little, he found strength in himself that he never knew he had. And though the scars of that heartbreak remained, they became a testament to his resilience. He learned to cherish the good memories without letting the pain define him. In the end, Leoncio emerged stronger, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that he had survived and would continue to thrive. "Don't call me anymore," she wrote a minute later. Leoncio barely restrained himself from smashing the phone against the wall. How could she? After all the words she said to him, and he, like a fool, was waiting for their meeting, and she just betrayed him. Leoncio threw himself on the bed and, unable to hold back, burst into tears. By evening, he had a fever. He called the office and said he wouldn't be able to come to work tomorrow. He slept through the entire next day. The fever subsided, but Leoncio couldn't get up and make himself do anything. He just wanted to forget. Fortunately, the next day was Saturday, and he didn't have to go to the office. Leoncio spent the whole day lying in bed again. He hardly ate anything. On Sunday, he got into the car provided by the company and drove out of town. He wandered through the surrounding fields for a long time, trying not to think about anything, but he couldn't erase Lord's image from his memory. The girl stood before his mental eyes as if alive. However much Leoncio tried, he couldn't help but feel love for her. "I must let her go," he said aloud. She chose someone else. Returning home, Sanchez returned the ticket, took a bath, and shaved, determined to start a new life without Lord. He blocked her number to stop checking incoming calls and messages every minute. On Monday, the young man went to work, and the familiar life once again swept him into the whirlpool of events. Leoncio tried not to remember the past and not to think about the future. All he had left was the present, and he was ready to act and make the most of everything it could offer him. He succeeded in everything he undertook, and with each success, he reached higher peaks. Eventually, Leoncio Sanchez left the company that had opened up so many opportunities for him, returned to his homeland, and started his own business. Luck favored him in everything. His business brought in more and more money, and one day, Leoncio became one of the most successful and wealthy people in the country. "So what do you think my mother did?" Sanchez heard the question, which seemed to carry an Arctic chill. He blinked, pushing away the memories, and focused on Blanca's face. She looked at him hostilely. "She found someone else 2 weeks before the wedding." "Isn't that enough?" he said angrily. The blank expression on her face ignited as she looked at the millionaire in astonishment. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, bewildered. Leoncio stood up from the table and turned away to the window. Long-forgotten feelings of resentment, powerlessness, and despair surged back into him with renewed force. "So she kept this from me," the man bitterly uttered. Blanca remained silent, casting her eyes down. She no longer felt hatred towards the millionaire. Something about the man's posture and the tone of his voice made her reconsider her opinion of him. "I don't know anything about it, but I'm sure it's a mistake," she whispered. "After all, my mother was already pregnant with me 2 weeks before your wedding." Leoncio felt like he misheard. He turned to the girl, staring at her incredulously. "What? But that can't be." Blanca bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. "My mother told me that you spent the night together before your departure. That's how I came into existence," she said softly. Leoncio nervously ran his hand through his hair and sat down. Then he closed his eyes, pain contorting his features. "Is it true?" he asked without lifting his gaze. "Just don't lie to me, please. I know what people are capable of for money." He looked at Blanca. She was as pale as a sheet. "I know you don't believe me," she murmured, "but I want to get to the bottom of this myself. I always dreamed of seeing my father, of feeling what it's like to be a beloved daughter. I've always been deprived of that. My mother said my father died, but one day I found her diary and learned everything." Leoncio looked at Blanca, unsure whether to believe her or not, but his heart squeezed in response to her words. He no longer saw her as a brazen hypocrite. No, there was something in her eyes that made her seem fragile and vulnerable. He wanted to embrace her like his own daughter, to stroke her hair for a long time, soothing her worries and instilling confidence in her for tomorrow. "I think only one person can give us the right answer." "It's Lord," the man finally said decisively. "But she doesn't know I'm here," the girl said, frightened. "I got a job with you without her knowledge. She doesn't think highly of you. I've heard her say many times that you're a coward and a scoundrel when she saw you on TV." Leoncio flared up. So that's what Lord thinks of me, he bitterly thought to himself. Then he stood up decisively and, circling the table, extended his hand to Blanca. Let's go, señorita. We need to resolve this as quickly as possible. Your mother will have to give us an answer. They left the office, descended in the elevator, and got into an expensive car driven by an elderly chauffeur. Where to, Mr. Sanchez, he asked. Leoncio nodded at Blanca. The girl gave the address, and the car set off. On the way, Leoncio and Blanca remained silent. Finally, the car stopped in front of a rather affluent house. The man and the girl got out of the car. Is Lord home? Leoncio asked anxiously. Yes, she's working remotely, Blanca replied. Leoncio hesitated. Perhaps it's worth warning her, not to catch her off guard. But Blanca shook her head. No, let's just do it now, so she has no way to retreat. Sanchez nervously swallowed. Blanca took out a key from her purse and opened the door. They entered the bright hallway. Mom, it's me, Blanca called out. Is everything okay? Leoncio heard a painfully familiar voice coming from somewhere very close. He suppressed the urge to rush into the adjacent room and embrace Lord. Yes, but I'm not alone. I have a guest with me, and he wants to see you, Blanca declared. Who is it? The woman replied, and Leoncio heard the sound of a chair being pushed back. In a moment, Lord appeared at the threshold. She was wearing an elegant dark green dress and a white cardigan. Her hair was shorter than in her youth, but still the same shade of red. It cascaded in voluminous waves over her shoulders. Lord's gaze remained unchanged. Leoncio once again saw the same blue mischievous eyes of the young woman he still couldn't forget. However, when Lord realized who stood before her, shock flickered in her eyes. She anxiously covered her mouth with her hand. Hello, Lord, Leoncio murmured softly. His hands trembled, his heart pounded desperately in his chest. What are you doing here? Lord asked harshly, finally regaining her composure. She crossed her arms and looked at the man with hostility and coldness. I came to find out the truth, Leoncio admitted. What truth are you interested in? Lord retorted. At that moment, Blanca intervened in the conversation. Mom, are we just going to stand in the doorway? Let's go into the room. Lord shifted her gaze to Blanca, and her facial expression softened slightly. She silently turned and headed into the living room, with Leoncio following her and Blanca bringing up the rear. As everyone sat down, there was a palpable tension in the room. Sensing it, Blanca decided she was unnecessary here. As soon as the girl left, Leoncio couldn't hold back and spoke as if all those years hadn't passed. Why are you angry with me? It was you, not me, who didn't answer my calls and then wrote that you met someone else and fell in love. Lord raised her eyebrows in astonishment. What? I never wrote that, she exclaimed. I was pregnant and waiting for you to tell you about it in person, not over the phone. And you just disappeared and blocked my number. Are you saying I made it all up? Leoncio replied in the same tone. Lord looked at him with confusion. Then her eyes clouded over for a moment, as if she was trying to remember something. Wait. Before that happened, I lost my phone. I was sure it was on my nightstand, but it wasn't there. The next day, I found it under my pillow. It was very strange. I never put it there. But I was so glad to find it that I didn't think much of it. I thought I'd see a bunch of missed calls and messages from you, but the phone was empty, so I called myself only to hear that my number was blocked. I sat on the bed, feeling out of sorts when my sister walked into the room. She asked me how I was doing, and I complained that I couldn't reach you on the phone. He probably found someone else. Federica shrugged indifferently and left the room with these words. Lord helplessly shrugged her shoulders and cast her gaze down. And you believed her, Leoncio guessed. Federica never liked me from the start. She probably didn't want us to get married. I wouldn't be surprised if I found out she took your phone and wrote those messages. Lord flared up but couldn't retort. She's always been a rebel, and yes, she was against the wedding. She was jealous of me being with you, the woman confessed and suddenly burst into tears. What's wrong with you? Leoncio trembled. He wanted to hold Lord close and never let go. Federica ran away from home when she turned 18. We don't know where she is, if she's alive. Our parents nearly went mad with worry. It undermined their health. I'm sorry, Lord, Leoncio whispered. He hesitantly stood up and approached. Then he sat down on the couch next to the woman and gently hugged her, fearing she might push him away. But Lord, on the contrary, leaned into him and cried even harder. So they sat embraced until the woman calmed down. Original paragraph. He turned on the TV screen, navigating to the surveillance footage. Rewinding to the relevant moment, he fast-forwarded through the recording, settling onto the couch to watch. The scene unfolded predictably. The maid, in her black uniform and white apron, entered the office and began cleaning. She meticulously organized the papers and folders scattered on the desk, mopped the floor, and dusted the bookshelves and safes. Leoncio yawned, fast-forwarding to the following day's footage. Again, the same routine played out, mundane yet thorough actions, almost lulling Leoncio to sleep with their repetitive precision. However, this time, the maid walked across the floor in white socks with a serious and even tense look, which amused Sanchez. He was about to turn off the video, satisfied that the maid hadn't touched his money, when suddenly on the video, Blanca entered his office again. She was already wearing her street clothes, the same gray sweater and wide dark blue jeans. She stood in the middle of the office for a while as if hesitating. Leoncio leaned forward, watching the screen intently. What was she going to do? Rewritten paragraph. He powered on the television, his fingers deftly navigating to the surveillance footage. Rewinding to the crucial moment, he swiftly fast-forwarded through the recording, easing back into the couch to scrutinize the events. The scene unfolded with monotonous predictability. The maid, clad in her crisp black uniform and white apron, entered the office and began her meticulous cleaning routine. She painstakingly organized the scattered papers and disarrayed folders on the desk, mopped the floor with diligent care, and dusted the bookshelves and safes with a methodical thoroughness. Leoncio stifled a yawn, fast-forwarding to the footage from the following day. Once again, the same mundane routine played out, the maid's diligent actions almost hypnotic in their repetitive precision, threatening to lull him into a drowsy stupor. However, this time, an unexpected detail caught his eye. The maid glided across the floor in white socks, her expression serious and tense, which brought a hint of amusement to Sanchez. Just as he was about to switch off the video, satisfied that the maid had not tampered with his money, something unusual occurred. Blanca re-entered the office, now dressed in her street clothes, the familiar gray sweater and wide dark blue jeans. She paused in the center of the office, lingering as if caught in a moment of indecision. Leoncio's interest peaked, and he leaned forward, his eyes glued to the screen. What was she contemplating? The air grew thick with anticipation as he watched her every move, his mind racing with possibilities, his heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The millionaire decided to test the new maid by leaving the safe open and turning on the camera. This bold move would reveal whether trust could be placed in her hands. Dear viewers, what have you learned from this emotional journey of love, trust, heartbreak, and resilience? We would love to hear from you. Please comment below with one thing you have learned and plan to bring into practice in your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.